Alrighty there, peeps. So remember that events do not exist in a vacuum. And while America is going through changes with taxes and establishing a central bank, and under the new administration of Woodrow Wilson and our interesting relationship with our southern neighbor, there are things going on outside of our country, and we need to take a brief side trip to look at this because this is going to be a major issue that we will be talking about in the coming lessons. So let's just start with the background. Um, when you look at conflicts, sometimes they're really easy to understand. I don't think, unless you are somebody who is really misinformed and kind of kooky, um, there's very little room for debate as to what caused World War II. Um, you can split hairs, but I mean, realistically, the causes of the American Revolution are pretty straightforward. The Spanish American War, while it's kind of goofy, um, looking at it contextually at the time, it makes perfect sense why the war started. World War One is a completely different animal, and it's a confused, utter mess, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So in 1914, Europe itself looked very different than it does today. So let's take a quick look at Europe in 1914. All right. So if you see on this map, for example, um, you may notice immediately that there are certain things just like not here. For example, Finland doesn't exist. Um, all of those little countries, like right in here and all of them up here, they're not there either. You have a continent made up of essentially six gigantic empires, technically seven. Um, you have Russia in all of its massive expansion. You have the German Empire. You have the United Kingdom of Great Britain. You have the Republic of France, which is also an empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. The uh, Kingdom of Italy, which is an empire as well. And over here you have the Ottoman Empire. There's a lot of countries that don't exist in 1914. And Europe itself was divided into two massive alliances. On the one hand, you have the United Kingdom of Great Britain, France, and Russia together. This is known as the Triple Entente. Entente is a French word that means like agreement or understanding. On the other side, you have Germany, Austria, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Italy forming what is referred to as the Triple Alliance. And notice that each of them are in a group of three. The idea behind this is a concept that had grown out of the end of the Napoleonic Wars 100 years earlier called balance of power. The theory behind it, not unlike the theory of salary caps in professional sports, is that no country will go to war because all the countries are more or less equal to each other. And it's sort of like you can declare war on somebody, but odds are, even if you technically win, you're going to lose a lot. And do you really want to do that? Because your enemies are all basically the same power as you. And for the better part of a century, and for Europe, this is huge, the Europeans avoid a major conflict. The key there is major. There's a couple of minor blips on the radar. About the most significant of the blips is the Crimean War of 1854 to 1856, which was fought um, in the area that is now modern Ukraine between the very bizarre, like, pairing of, on one side, the Russian Empire, and on the other side, the Russians are fighting against the Ottoman Empire of Turkey, the French, and the English, who, by the way, England and France, that's the first time in nearly 8 centuries that they've been on the same side in a war. It was really weird, and nothing really comes out of it to speak of. The most significant things that come out of the Crimean War are Sir Alfred Lord Tennyson's epic poem "Charge of the Light Brigade," the establishment of the Red Cross, and one of the greatest Iron Maiden songs of all time, "The Trooper." But really, nothing to speak of. It's a really kind of a nothing war. You have the Austro-Prussian War of like 1866, where the Austrians and northern Germans of Prussia fight each other. It very short and doesn't really do much except like Germany grabs a couple of chunks of Austria. And then the Franco-Prussian War of 1876, where out of the war you have the emergence of modern Germany. But for the most part, for 100 years, there's really no big wars, which is, a change from a continent that had, at one point in time, had a war between England and France that lasted 112 years. Now, despite the fact that there are no major wars, that does not mean that there are not little bubbling issues under the surface. Those bubbling issues, the French and the Germans, both sides want to go to war again. The French to avenge the loss of the Franco-Prussian War, the Germans just to beat up the French again. Germany and England. So, in the late 1880s, 1890s, the German emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II, that's Emperor William II, started Germany on a massive naval arms building program, not unlike the United States, and also not unlike the United States, influenced by the writings of Alfred Thayer Mahan about the relationship between the significance, power, and prestige of nations and the strength of their navies. And by the early 1900s, you have German creations such as this magnificent beast here. This is the Schließen. Pop it up here. So look at the pretty darn impressive looking boat. You got big guns here. You got big guns in the back. You got these guns on the side. And unlike the U.S. battleships, the guns aren't like hanging off the sides. It's a very impressive looking modern boat. And the Germans build, several of them. And it's very cool. And then on the flip side, they're doing this because the Germans want to build the biggest navy in Europe. On the flip side, the British build this hunkin' beast. And this obviously is a drawing of it, but you get a picture of like what it looks like in the front, the sides, and from the top view. This is the Dreadnought, the Mac Daddy of all naval war. Notice on the Schließen, it has 4 big guns and lots of little guns. The Dreadnought has 10 big guns and lots of little guns. The Dreadnought's armor is thicker than the Schließen's. The Dreadnought's size is longer than the Schließen's. The Dreadnought's guns are bigger than the Schließen's. And the Dreadnought's engines are faster than the Schließen's. And the British don't just build one of these things, they build dozens of them. And the Germans try to respond. And they are spending themselves into a debt trying to keep up with the British Navy. And to be fair, the British Navy did this in part too, just to show the Americans that, you look impressive, but we're the British. Hold my beer. And the Germans end up deciding to invest in building a different kind of boat that nobody else is, the submarine, or as they refer to it, the U-boat, underwater boat. Then there's the Germans and the Russians. Um, Germany just wants to beat up Russia. Why? Well, here's Germany, here's Russia. They're next door to each other. Look at how flippin' big Russia is. I mean, Russia is ginormous. It is now, but it was even bigger back then. The Germans just want to beat them up. Um, Not to point fingers, but notice a kind of a pattern here of countries that have issues. They all kind of involve one country. And to be fair, it's not necessarily the people themselves. It really is more of a reflection of the leadership of the countries. And last but not least, Austria and Russia. So Russia doesn't get away scot-free from this either. They got problems too. And Russia and Austria, yes, they do border each other. That's not the real issue. Russia and Austria have a problem over this area down here. This is the Balkan Peninsula. Um, and it at one time belonged to the Ottoman Empire of Turkey. But these countries have gradually become independent, starting with Greece and then the other ones coming off. Now, Russia's interest in the Balkans has to do with the fact that, especially in this sort of like middle portion right here, right between Greece and Romania, um, you have, I think this is Romania, um, or maybe it's Bulgaria. This might be Bulgaria here. You have ethnically, all of these people are essentially the same. They are Slavs, Slav, not Slavs, which means that as Slavic peoples, they are ethnically related to the Russians. Specifically, Russia is very, very concerned about the fate of the people of Serbia, who are like Russia's little cousins. And the Serbs and the Russians are not only Slavic, they're also Orthodox Christians. And the Russians regard themselves as the protectors of Orthodoxy. And in fact, if we look at this, you got Russia and Bulgaria and some of Romania and Serbia and Greece and Montenegro, all of which are Orthodox Christian. On the flip side, the Austrians aren't looking at ethnicity. Austria is a mess. What the Austrians are looking at is the fact that much of this northern portion up here is Roman Catholic, which is what Austria is officially. And they're interested in expanding their influence into that area, and they kind of want to have, more control. For the Russians, controlling this Balkan area would also give them access to the Mediterranean directly, which they do not currently have access to. This is a big issue for the Russians, and they need a like access point into the Mediterranean. Now, these are issues bubbling under the surface. So what makes the bubbling cauldron actually, explode? Well, what makes it actually explode, and let's see, there you go. And now it just literally skipped a page. What makes it explode? Well, we can understand the start of World War I in a very general way by looking at an acronym, the word MAIN. The main causes of World War I are M, militarism. Every nation in Europe spent enormous amounts of money on modernizing their military. They had bought the latest weapons, the latest Krupp guns. They had built the biggest, strongest navy that they were capable of. They had invested in American machine gun technology. Um, they began investing in new emerging technologies. Like in France, they bought the airplane from the Wright brothers. Every one of these countries spent money on their military, and their militaries wanted to prove that they were superior to everybody else's. A, the alliance system. You had the Triple Alliance, again, Germany, Italy, and Austria Hungary, and you had the Triple Entente of the United Kingdom, France, and Russia. These two alliance systems were formed specifically against each other to try to balance each other out. The problem is that there are secret parts of their alliances that not even the governments know about. How is that possible? Because the military is oftentimes a part of stuff that we just don't know. Secrets are no fun. Secrets started World War One. There's also a very bizarre family connection with all of this. Queen Victoria and her late husband Albert had, I believe it was 9 children. They would have had more, but Albert died early. Those children, by tradition, had to marry into other royal families. And other royal families had to marry royal families. And what you have is a giant network of interconnected family relationships. The monarchies of England, Italy, Spain, um, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Russia, Germany, Austria, Greece, all of these countries were all first cousins with each other. They were all directly related. They all had big family reunions every year. They'd all get together. They all wrote letters to each other. They hung out with each other. And as will occasionally happen in families, there was a lot of rivalry between those families. And they would trash talk. You know, the Emperor of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm, would talk bad to the Tsar of Russia. Yo, Nicky, my army could kick your army's butt. Love you, Willie. Yo, Willie, bring it. We'll show you. Love, Nicky. You know, hey, cousin Georgie, my new Navy's gonna beat up your Navy and we'll show, Grandma who's actually the best out of all of us. Yo, Willie, bring it. Grandma already knows my Navy's bigger than yours. Ha ha ha. While it was friendly, it kind of wasn't friendly. And they were only half joking with each other. Imperialism, the I. These countries engaged in a game, essentially, to build the biggest and strongest empire. By 1900, almost 20% of the world's land mass and almost 50% of the world's population was controlled by England. Other countries grabbed up pieces of the world as well. By 1900, there were only 3 African countries that were not ruled by a European country. And ironically enough, one of those was actually an African country started by former American slaves. And there was 2 ways to approach building an empire. You could build an empire based on wealth and strategic location, like the British, or you could build an empire based on sheer size, like, say, the French, who ruled almost all of North Africa, which looked amazing on a map until you realized that it was all the Sahara Desert. And then you have other countries like, the Belgians, the Germans, who grab up pieces of wherever they can find, and they attempt to build an empire to, keep up with everybody else. This is what America did. This is what Japan did. The Ottoman Empire controlled much of Northeast Africa and the Middle East. The Russian Empire controlled basically like every possible country or group of people that touched Russia on 2 continents. And they were encroaching into China. These countries were all engaged, and it really was a game to them. It literally was referred to as the Great Game. And they spied on each other, and they were all involved with just knowing what was going on and trying to undermine and destabilize each other. And last but not least, the end, nationalism. Nationalism is like patriotism on steroids. Nationalism, if you want a good example for what nationalism is soccer hooliganism. It's what happens during the English soccer season when Man U plays Man U, what is it, Manchester U and Manchester City, when they play each other. They hate each other. When the World Cup comes along, which it will this year, violence is always there. I mean, in one case, in a match between Brazil and Argentina, the losing side actually tracked down the referees and killed him in his home because their side lost. This is nationalism. It's the belief that your country is not just great, but it's superior. Your country is superior, your people are superior, your culture is superior. And we need to be very clear about this. This is not a racial thing. It's a culture nation thing. British India felt superior to the countries around it because it was British India. Japan felt superior to every other Asian people because they were Japanese. The German African countries were better off than the French African countries, largely because of German organizational and structural components. There was a genuine element here of the belief that a country's national identity, a country's cultural identity, made it superior to those around it. And this superiority was a rivalry. And the desire to prove out and show superiority fed into all of these other areas. Now, what we're going to talk about in the next lesson is the very small and, quite frankly, very stupid thing that lights this giant powder keg of primed dynamite to explode into World War I. Peace and love.